Morning Mindset, a daily dose of practical wit and wisdom with a professional educator and trainer, Amazon best-selling author, United States Marine, television and radio host, Paul G. Markel. Each episode will focus on positive and productive ways to strengthen your mindset and help you improve your relationships, career goals, and overall well-being. Please welcome your host, Paul G. Markel.
Hello and welcome back. I am your host, Paul Markel. Thank you for joining me for Morning Mindset today. Yes, today's title, I did that on purpose. I used a double negative quite deliberately. I understand that I wrote, "Don't tell me not to." And I am going to elaborate on that right now. I've been through a lot of instructor training and instructor development over the years. I've been a coach and an instructor and a teacher for a long time. And one of the basic instructor training concepts that I've encountered over the years is to use positive language instead of negative language. And you're like, well, duh, Paul, that seems pretty simple, but it's tough. And I'm going to give you a great example. If you are a parent and you have children, you have said to your children more than once, "Stop that. Don't touch that. Put that down." None of those are positives. But those are things that you had to say to your kids to get them to obey and to not hurt themselves. Because when you say stop that, a lot of times you're telling them that because if they don't stop that, they're going to hurt themselves or hurt someone else. Don't touch that. Put that down. Things like that. But when you're teaching people a skill, you need to learn to say do instead of don't or do not. And it's not easy. I want you to think about it as you go throughout your life. It's easy if you're coaching someone to say, "Don't do that," or "Don't put your hand that way," or what have you. Instead, what you need to do is you need to say, instead of saying don't, you need to come up with a positive, productive way. For instance, if someone, or I've taught many people to shoot a handgun, to the basic marksmanship principles of shooting a handgun. And let's say they weren't doing it right, or let's say that they were doing something which we call slapping the trigger. They're reaching out and they're pulling it really fast, and it's disturbing the sights in the gun, and they're not hitting the target. If I stood next to them and said, "Stop slapping the target," stop slapping the trigger. Stop slapping the trigger. Don't slap the trigger. How does that teach them to do it correctly? You say, well, it obviously doesn't, Paul, because you're just saying don't do something. Instead of saying stop slapping the trigger or don't slap the trigger, what I do instead is I give them a positive, a deliberate. I tell them to put the fingerprint of their trigger finger directly onto the trigger, and I tell them to press it smoothly and deliberately straight back towards their eyeball until the gun fires. And if they do that, if they apply it, then the bullets will go right where they're supposed to go. As a matter of fact, I had that experience here about a couple weeks ago. I had a gentleman I was working with on the range, and he went up. I had him shoot a whole magazine just on his own, no coaching, what have you, and his grouping was about 6 to 10 inches across. And so I walked up to him and I said, "Okay, this is what I want you to do." And I told him, "Put your fingerprint on the trigger. I want you to look at the front sight, and I want you to imagine that your front sight is on a rail. It's on a track, and your front sight is attached to the trigger. And when you press the trigger, you're going to be pulling that front sight straight back deliberately towards your eye. I want you to think that. I want you to look at that front sight, and as you press it, I want you to think, okay, I'm going to press it straight back towards my eye. I want you to do it every time." So he did, and I watched him. And I reminded him, I said, "Keep doing it like that, focus." And as long as he focused and did what I told him, the positive thing that I told him, his group went from being 6 to 7 to 8 inches across or larger down to just a couple of inches across. it improved dramatically, because rather than saying, you're slapping the trigger, stop slapping the trigger, don't slap the trigger, I gave him something else. I gave him something positive to do. If you need to teach someone how to do something, if you need to show someone how to do something, it's easy to fall back on the don't or do not language. Don't do that. Stop doing that. What have you. And you may be trying to save their life. You put that down because it's poisonous or what have you, or you're going to get shocked. That's one thing, but you need to have something else that is positive. If you're going to teach people, if you're going to coach people, we just talked about coaches and instructors and so on a little while ago. If you're going to do that, you need to come up with something positive. And I'm not saying you need to be a wimp, and I'm not saying that you need to try and explain to a 2-year-old why they shouldn't touch the stove. Okay, all the 2-year-old needs to know is don't touch that, it's hot. You don't need to sit them down and give them a full explanation. But at the same time, if you're talking about dealing with adults and you need to show them how to do something the right way, it doesn't really help them to tell them that they're doing it wrong. You can say, okay, this is not correct. Now I'm going to show you how to do it the right way. And that is difficult. It's tough, especially if you know how to do it. If you already know how to do that thing and you're pretty good at it, you might be baffled at why other people just can't seem to get it. You're like, no, do like I do. Just do it just like me. And that's another thing, telling people, do it just like I do. That doesn't really help them because they're not you. They don't have your body. They can't necessarily do it just like you unless you give them something, a verbal cue to do it. So like I said, with the pressing the trigger and what have you, the next time you have to explain how to do something or you need to correct someone's behavior, rather than simply saying, don't do that, try and come up with a positive way to explain it in an affirmative way. Say do instead of do not. All right? Try using do instead of don't more often when it comes to coaching and teaching people. I am going to be taking a week off. Yes, indeed, I am. This is going to be the last one you're going to hear for a week because I will be on the road. I'll be doing a great deal of traveling, and while I am traveling, I will be talking to people, and I'm going to have very, very busy days. So the chances that I will have time to sit behind the microphone and record these morning mindsets are going to be slim. That's okay. It'll give you the opportunity to catch up. If you just started listening a week ago or 2 weeks ago or even a month ago, there's still a whole lot that you can listen to. So when there isn't one on Monday, don't panic. There's a reason. I'm on the road, I'm traveling, but I promise I'll be back. And I am Paul Markel, and I am your host. And I'll talk to you again in the very near future.
Thank you for spending time with us today. To get show notes, submit a topic request, and for more from your host, Paul G. Markel, visit morningmindsetpodcast.com. That's morningmindsetpodcast.com. Please leave a review for this podcast on your favorite podcast player. We appreciate your time and effort, and we look forward to reading your honest feedback.